1, Bibles, guns, clingers, deplorables. A new chapter offered to you by the President of the United States. Supporters of Donald Trump are garbage. 2, Kamala Harris requires that Joe Rogan come to her. That it be limited to 1 hour. Who's demanding, Joe Rogan or Kamala Harris? We break it all down with my Fox and Friends weekend co-host on an episode of Off the Rails, Pete Hegseth. 3, couple of Yankees fans rip a ball out of Mookie Betts' glove, and I love it. It is the Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand if you're listening on terrestrial radio, coast to coast, by heading over to Apple or Spotify and hitting subscribe. Or joining us every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time by going to YouTube and hitting subscribe. By setting a reminder every day and heading over to Facebook to watch the Will Cain Show. Next week will be the week of Election Day, the race for the President of the United States. And so we will be doing something more, doing something special here on the Will Cain Show. On Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th, I will be live from North Carolina, live at a diner for 2 hours starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. This show will always be available, as it always is, on Spotify or Apple. But if you want to join us next week live at 10 a.m. Eastern up until 12 p.m. Eastern, live from a diner in North Carolina, as votes begun to be cast, just head over to YouTube or Facebook and make sure you set a reminder. Hopefully we will not be shadow banned. Hopefully you will get your reminder and you'll watch the Will Cain Show live on YouTube. What more, all next week we'll be doing extended shows at a minimum an hour, mini episodes up to 2 hours as we bring in numerous guests. You name it, they're going to be here on the Will Cain Show to break down minute by minute, hour by hour, exactly first what we expect to happen, then what is happening, and then after it happens, what it means in the race for the president. A radio show, a podcast, a digital show does not have to be therapy. But having gone back and forth on this and even soliciting some feedback from the militia, I just know that if I don't have authenticity and I don't have honesty, then I have nothing. Nothing between you and me. So this isn't meant to be therapy. This is meant to clear the air. I was in a bad mood yesterday here on the Will Cain Show, and that's the truth. Now, I was upset, and I largely took it out on my guest from Outkick, Bobby Burack, and I regret that. And I've apologized to Bobby. And there was a lot of different factors that have gone into the way that show went down yesterday. Admittedly, and everybody on the show has talked about it, I didn't like the way the show was produced. And you don't need to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But that's just me being honest with you, truthfully. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but I do think that you should be behind the curtains. I don't think there should be a version of Will behind the scenes and a version of Will here in front of the camera, in front of the microphone. It should be the same Will. And I think that's the only way in 2024 that you get any credibility or give me any credibility, that you get any honesty, that you and I can have a relationship built upon any trust. Because I do believe, as I started out in my segment yesterday, you are inundated with insanity and a lack of, honestly, an effort at even trust. And I don't know where this is headed. I really don't. I think we're deep into the world of not just propaganda, but artificial intelligence. As I'm going to talk about in just a few moments. Elon Musk has promised something like, I don't know how many robots, basically a robot for every household by 2040. And as we just kind of think about this world shifting and changing so rapidly and our ability to make smart decisions, right decisions, honest decisions, all you need is some trust. And that's what I've got to have with you. So, I was upset about the way the show was produced. And we've talked about that. I wasn't upset, by the way, with Bobby Burack's analysis. Some people thought that he was laying out election scenarios that included Kamala Harris's path to victory. I wasn't upset about that. I'm never upset about really what anybody has to say. But there is another compounding factor, too, perhaps. And they're not excuses, they're reasons. Man, I got to do a better job of getting sleep. And I have the last 2 nights, and I'm in a much better mood. I stacked up 3 nights of about 4 to 5 hours sleep. And at my age, I do think that matters. I mean, I know it has an impact. I just do. It just is. That's what happens when you're 49. And I quit Zen again on Saturday. And look, I've done this twice now, and I am moody. I'm getting there. I can see some light at the end of this tunnel. But it doesn't matter. I got to get over it in real time, even if I have some legitimate reasons to not to be happy with the way a show is produced. So I got to get over it in real time. I can't use freaking Zen as an excuse for a bad mood, and it certainly wasn't deserved by Bobby Barack. So he has my apologies. You have my apologies. I shouldn't be in a bad mood when I do this show. I have a dream job that I get to wake to every day. So doesn't happen often. When it does, there's nothing I can do but be 100% honest with you, as I'm going to be as well today now. Story number 1. Half of America, garbage. That, according to the sitting president of the United States. In what has turned out to get more media attention than 2 assassination attempts, Tony Hinchcliffe's joke at a rally at Madison Square Garden has absolutely driven the news cycle. If you missed yesterday's show where we discussed this, or Monday's show where we discussed this, where Young Establishment James and I went to the rally in New York City at Madison Square Garden, here was the joke by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe.
There's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Now, again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody. This isn't exactly a perfect comedy setup.
There's a really interesting conversation to be had about why that joke didn't land comedically, why it just wasn't that funny. In fact, I'm going to get into that in just a moment with Pete Hegseth. But that joke has been the trampoline from which the mainstream media has launched a series of acrobatic tricks and turning that into a Nazi rally and to ensure that the Puerto Rican vote is thoroughly insulted, offended, and will not ever vote for Donald Trump. But there is no brakes on insanity. There are no guardrails. And this is kind of what happens. Once you start heading down the, I'm so offended, I'm a victim, you might want to see if there's an e-brake in the middle of that car, because you could look up one day and the President of the United States, in response, calls half of America garbage. Enjoy.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Now, here's what's fascinating about this. There's several layers. This happened immediately. The View was the most egregious example of this. Did you notice how when Joe Biden was speaking, his demonization of Puerto Ricans? He's referring to Donald Trump, not Tony Hinchcliffe. They first personed this entire episode into Donald Trump. And again, that was most blatantly done on The View. This is how far we are from what I tried to begin the show with you today. Any even effort at the truth. Coming from the White House, Donald Trump didn't make that joke. Even if you didn't like that joke, and even if you have thin skin and you're offended, it wasn't uttered by Donald Trump. And it's simply, I don't even want to play the games of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. It's simply a lie to suggest his demonization of Puerto Ricans, Donald Trump. But once you've ripped the e-brake out of the middle of the console and thrown it out the window going 80 miles an hour down the highway, you don't know where you're going to end up. And Joe Biden ends up saying his supporters are garbage. The only garbage I see is Donald Trump's supporters. Now, let's have some fun with misinformation. This was done in real time. This is Orwellian 1984 Big Brother shifting the words in front of your eyes in real time. The transcript, as reported by the White House, suggested that Joe Biden had an apostrophe at the end of supporters. So it wasn't supporters plural, it was supporters possessive. Here, let me show you. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I'm going to give you the White House transcript of what Joe Biden had to say, what they put out. This is straight out of 1984. We will read now together from the transcript. And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or a Puerto Rico where I'm from. In my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. We should take a moment to say, what is going on? WTF? How am I supposed to understand all those half sentences? Is he talking about the people of Delaware, his home state, or is he talking about the people of Puerto Rico? Who exactly is he calling good, decent, honorable people? I pick up in the transcript. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, his, his demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done, everything we've been. They took supporters, plural, and added an apostrophe. Welcome to Apostrophe Gate. By doing so, they're suggesting that Joe Biden is saying the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters' demonization of Latinos is unconscionable. Of course, that sentence doesn't make any sense. If I turn it into possessive, like it's garbage that his supporters are demonizing Latinos, then help me understand the end of that sentence is unconscionable. It's the ending of one sentence, a stutter, and the beginning of a new sentence. It does and accurately read as follows. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. New sentence. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. Don't believe me? Don't like my characterization? Listen to it one more time with your ears in the words of Joe Biden.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American.
What do you hear? Supporters apostrophe, supporters plural. Everyone knows what they hear. He called supporters of Donald Trump garbage. Add it to the pantheon. Deplorables. Clingers to guns and Bibles. Nazis. Fascists. Are you sitting here telling me that after 3.5 years of calling his supporters fascists, that somehow you would never, it's totally beyond the pale of your character, to call his supporters garbage? You believe his supporters are garbage, and now, because a comedian made a joke about Puerto Rico, by the way, not Puerto Ricans, about Puerto Rico, you feel licensed to say that half of America is garbage. Alex Thompson from Axios says, I asked the White House how they knew Biden only meant supporters, possessive, with the apostrophe, as they have it in the transcript. Did they talk to Biden to ask him what he meant? The spokesperson asked to go off the record. We declined. They didn't comment further. This was echoed on CNN, where, for example, you can see a lower third discussion with Governor Josh Shapiro, where they characterize it as Biden. Only garbage I see are Trump supporters demonizing Latinos. It's not Trump supporters, they say Biden calls garbage, but Trump supporters demonizing of Latinos. This happened not just in CNN and from the White House transcript. This happened at the New York Times. This happened at Axios, where they wrote it as follows. They wrote, a comedian who appeared ahead of Trump at Madison Square Garden in New York City on Sunday called the American territory an island of garbage. Biden, in a Zoom call with the organization Voto Latino, said the only garbage was the hatred of Trump supporters who said such things about American citizens. That is a totally manufactured statement. There is no reference whatsoever to the hatred of Trump supporters, not even in the official 1984 Orwellian propaganda transcript from the White House. But the press immediately goes about changing the words in front of our eyes. Joe Biden called half of America garbage. The media inserted an apostrophe and then went about changing the American narrative in real time of the words you heard quite clearly. And guess what? It's all too much for even Kamala Harris, who stood for one of the first times in this campaign in front of her airplane, in front of the press, and made a statement and took questions. Here's Kamala Harris.
President Biden put this comment last night about garbage.
Listen, I think that, first of all, he clarified his comments, but let me be clear. I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. You heard my speech last night and continuously throughout my career. I believe that the work that I do is about representing all the people, whether they support me or not. And as President of the United States, I will be a president for all Americans, whether you vote for me or not. That is my responsibility, and that's the kind of work that I've done my entire career, and I take it very seriously.
Have you spoken to him about his comments and his intentions?
He did call me last night, but this didn't come up.
He called me last night, but this didn't come up. I'll be a president for all Americans, even, I presume, the ones she's called fascist and Nazis, but she would never call, like her sitting president, garbage. Let's break this down. Plus, why won't Kamala Harris go on the Joe Rogan Experience? We're going to break that down with my Fox and Friends weekend co-host, Pete Hegseth, coming up on The Will Cain Show. You have to come to me. I'm not going to do the full 3 hours, just 1 hour. And if you don't, how demanding of you, Joe Rogan. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe if you're listening on terrestrial radio at Spotify or Apple. First comment today on the Will Cain Show from you, the viewer and listener, is finally a notification. There has been some concern that YouTube is not pushing out notifications. If you subscribe to the Will Cain Show page, you'll get notifications of when we go live. That could be important next week when we break our regularly scheduled programming of noon Eastern time and go extended at 10 a.m. on Election Day. But there's concern, of course, are you getting those notifications from YouTube? That fits into a story that's circulating right now. The New York Times is doing a story where Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Benny Johnson, and approximately 30 conservative commentators on YouTube have gotten a note from a New York Times reporter saying, hey, we've been working with Media Matters. You guys know who Media Matters is, right? That's like the George Soros-funded, hugely far-left institution. Its only purpose, really, I'm serious just now, only purpose is to take down every form of right-wing media. For most of its existence, it's been focused on Fox News. But they're now pivoting to the digital environment. And so they have partnered with the New York Times to say all these conservative commentators on YouTube have said things. Just going to give you an example, because Tucker and Shapiro have posted the texts. Stuff like, oh, man, they changed the election laws in Pennsylvania at the 11th hour in 2020. They did. Or I can't remember the other things, but it's like unassailable things that we should be discussing in the media as huge misrepresentations, and therefore, why are you monetized on YouTube? It's an all-out assault between Media Matters and the New York Times on anyone talking on this platform, YouTube, so that you can't make money, you can be shadow banned, and no one will ever hear your message. Complete domination of the media and then, therefore, your mind. Well, still hit subscribe. And let me know if you're going to get the notification for the Will Cain Show. He's my co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend, Off the Rails, Off the Grid, and Off the Wall. It is Pete Hegseth on the Will Cain Show. What's up, man?
What's up?
What do you think about Joe Biden calling half of America garbage? Do you buy the apostrophe? It's like this is like
no. Your knowledge of
what's the
sentence structures is admirable, impressive, much better than
Thank you.
Than mine. My kid could do better than you, but I couldn't. You're
what's the Vanna White
exactly
show?
Right.
Pat Sajak? What is that show? Pat Sajak, Vanna White, is Wheel of Fortune? Yes. Yeah. Wheel of Fortune. Can I buy Val? Do you buy the apostrophe, Pete? Supporters. Apostrophe. Possessive, not plural.
Not. It is, and your riff on the media and its willingness. I mean, we know. Take the example of 60 Minutes and CBS. Just take the example of the fully edited answer that was inserted for her. That is the lens through which we should see every way they look at a unfairly taken statement by Trump or a recharacterized statement by Harris or Biden, they're not just going to paint it favorably. They're going to repaint it and retwist it. I actually think that stuff has stopped working because of a lot of the alternate media's ability to get the reality out through. Now, that leads to the story you just talked about, where they're going to try to deplatform a lot of people. But I think something like this is seen for what it is by the vast majority of people.
I really think it's weird where we're sitting when it comes to the media environment. I think you're right. It's like, it's the cornered animal syndrome. There's going to be a lot of, gnashing of teeth and claws, flailing about here as the animal dies. But it does feel a bit like an animal who is dying. There's news today, by the way, that I believe the Newark Star Ledger or something like that. It's a huge newspaper in New Jersey. By 2025 is going to cease print publication. You're talking about the newspaper as ceasing being a newspaper, right? Whatever's going on at Washington Post, I don't know. I don't know why Bezos says no endorsement. I don't know if it's business. I don't know if it's conscience. I don't know what he's doing. But same thing with CBS, as you point out, and all these others. It's like 15 years ago, the only check on that mechanism really would have been a Republican politician going, not fair, not fair. And then it would have sounded partisan. Now you got an alternate media environment that helps you highlight and understand. So I just kind of wonder, like, it's changing so fast. 5 years from now, I think 5 is probably a good number. Like, how much does CBS matter? You know what I mean? Well, I think we already know how much the Washington Post matters. New York Times matters still. But I think that's a glacier. That's a melting glacier. I don't know 5-10 years if they matter. I don't know when CBS stops mattering. But it's going to. It's all going to stop mattering. I don't know in its place what will matter. You know what I mean? Will Fox still be influential and important? Will all these aggregate podcasts and so forth be primary news sources? I don't know. But I just feel like what you're looking at is a dying animal with the media.
I agree. I think Fox is different because Fox has the best conservative opinion, and then also journalists that work or that integrate into the middle of that. And therefore, you end up getting a decent spectrum of perspectives. And it is the check to everybody else, right? So it's the one outlier. We have yet to see a single example of reformation of a newsroom. The only example of it that was successful was a revolution, and that was Twitter. Meaning, I'm going to buy it because I'm a billionaire. I'm going to fire 90% of the people that work there, and then I'll create a free speech platform. If he had tried to reform Twitter, he'd still be fighting his way into the door. It's just like Bezos trying to reform the Washington Post, or what we always hear about CNN's going to bring in conservative commentators. We're going to reform the way we do business. The entrenched interests of the left-wing ideological view are too strong. Reformation doesn't work. So you either have to implode it from within and rebrand, like Elon Musk did, or it's got to be something from the outside. I mean, take, for example, The Free Press by Bari Weiss. I'm not saying it has the reach of the New York Times, but you and I know plenty of people who rely and read that to say, this is an interesting take from people that we may not necessarily always agree with, but they're willing to be mostly fair for the most part, to both sides and entertain viewpoints that are otherwise completely rejected. So in 5 years, I think a lot of these dinosaurs will be gone. I think they'll be the ones that do it well, like X, like Fox, like a few others. I think will be able to adapt to the media environment because there's appetite for information. And then there'll just be a lot of new places new forums that are still going to have to do battle with the old platforms, like you pointed out, like YouTube, listen, they tried to get Rush Limbaugh off the air, right, on the fairness doctrine. They tried to get Fox Media Matters. That's exactly what they do. And now, of course, they're going to go at the YouTubes and the Rumbles and the X's and the Facebooks to say, you can talk all you want, you just can't reach your people. And that'll be that already is the fight.
Pete Hegseth is a good Donald Trump translator. I think we all understand that in many instances you need to take Donald Trump seriously, but not literally. This is a fascinating thing that he is saying. I want you to translate the seriousness of what Donald Trump is saying. He is talking about considering doing away with the income tax. Now, he doesn't get to just choose to do away with the income tax, right? That would take an act of Congress. But the federal income tax hasn't always been with us. It began in 1916. Today, it accounts for roughly 50% of total federal revenues, Pete. Another 40% comes from the corporate tax and the payroll tax. He's been asked this on a couple of occasions, and he said, yeah, I think we should do away with it. We could make up, in what he's suggesting, the revenue in tariffs. I don't know if that's true, Pete. I don't know that you could make up. From what I read, by the way, it would take like a 70% tariff on anything coming from overseas. And your buddy, Brian Bringberg, pointed out to me from Fox Business this weekend, but it's also like a sin tax. Like when you put in a sin tax, part of the point isn't just revenue generation, is to do away with the sin. So you put a tariff out there, you raise revenue, but you also reduce imports. So you won't get the revenue when we stop importing goods from wherever it may be, China. So it's not a one-for-one most likely revenue replacement. And that's fine. You can say, I'd like to starve the federal government of revenue if it went with a reduction in spending. Unfortunately, that's not what happens normally. We just rack up more debt. Do you think, from a moral perspective, I love it. I would imagine most people listening, love the idea. No more personal income tax. What do you think? Don't take him literally, take him seriously, or don't take him seriously, don't take it at all when it comes to income tax.
So I love it. I love the idea of it. I love the way you just laid it out. I agree with. Trump is very good he's a negotiator, right? And so he's very good at throwing something out that is further than he thinks he'll get to, but is an opening statement that places a marker that moves the goalposts on what the art of the possible is. So I think he's willing to say this because in a perfect world, if he could wave a magic wand, sure, he'd get rid of the income tax. And he's a true believer in tariffs. He wants to get us to the pre-NAFTA world, the pre-globalization world, where we were proud of the things that we made here. We were skeptical of things that went elsewhere, and we created incentives so our customers, our companies stayed and didn't go. That genie got out of the bottle. He wants to bring it back in. The idea of tariffs or taxing American companies less than folks overseas resonates with voters, makes a lot of sense. What does it do to the balance sheet? I don't know. Do I think he'll get rid of the 16th Amendment and abolish the income tax? Unfortunately, probably not. But I do think flatter and lower is better. And as our buddy Bremberg pointed out, any tax on productivity is problematic. And in this case, I liken it to, I'm here outside of Nashville. How does Nashville pay for most of what the city does? Taxes on hotels and liquor and others from bachelorette parties. It's the visitors that pay for the residents here for the most part. It's on Las Vegas and others do it. I kind of liken that to what the United States would attempt to do under Trump. It's like, you want to do business here? You love our customers. They're rich. They pay. You pay to have access here. And then otherwise, it helps our companies catch up in a way that they've fallen behind. So I take him seriously on it. I don't see the votes to do anything other than maybe lower it and flatten it a little bit.
You take him seriously, but not literally, because you see it as an opening marker in a negotiation. I'm curious how popular that would be. We've had various guys. Remember Herman Cain, 999? You've had, I can't remember which politician it was that said your income tax return should be able to fit on a postcard. We've had various guys look at some pretty, I don't want to call them radical, but reformative positions when it comes to the income tax. I just wonder how popular. So I saw this as well this morning. It's good to always be reminded of something like this, but the top 50% of income earners pay 98% of the federal revenue in income taxes. I'm curious how popular a huge reformation of income tax would be, because then I also wonder about voter turnout. Like, okay, if the bottom 50% of earners don't pay much or at all into income tax, and they're not going to care about that, right? But I also wonder what the vote turnout is among those people as well. So I don't know. I'm just kind of curious, like, if you took a really radical approach to income tax, is that a winner on a national stage?
I don't know. I mean, you have to be able to push through the demagoguery, and usually the demagoguery would be next level, rich v. poor, especially with a billionaire in the White House. You'd have to spend a lot of time tilling the ground and laying the ground markers for why this benefits the vast majority of people and not just the people that are going from 39.5% to 17. And because that's all that would be talked about is the upper bracket going down to 17 and getting a massive rich people tax cut. I think you'd have to combine it with, everything Trump is talking about right now. No tax on tips, no taxing American-made goods, there's a bunch of smaller issues. I can't remember them all right now that he's rolled out, that if you said, okay, yeah, we're doing it up here, but we're doing it over here too. And then here are the ways in which we're going to fund the federal government. Problem is it's growing
then they play the game
in such an unabated manner.
They play the game. They play the stats game. Oh, the rich are getting an X percentage tax cut. Yep. You're only getting a Y percentage of tax cut, even though we're all going to the same flat rate that's lower than what you're paying now. It's no matter how you do it, they are going to paint it as this huge boondoggle for the rich. All right, so Pete has always told me that he wants to do stand-up comedy. I think it's an admirable thing to want to do because it's not like saying I want to jump off a cliff. It's like saying I would like to do a triple Lindy off a 60-foot cliff. Like it's not just saying I want to do something. I want to do it good. But you have told me that you're okay with bombing. Like you even want to feel that, right? You want to experience the bomb. Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah, I want to feel like you and I give speeches. I know what it feels like to give a speech now. I can read a room. I can decide length, tone, political, apolitical. Comedy's a whole nother jam. And you might think you go in anyway. I pushed real hard to do a comedy bit on our New Year's special both years, and I was denied both years because I was going to try my debut live on New Year's Eve, and they said that's a bad idea. But yeah, it takes interesting. The more you talk to comedians, you realize the timing, the delivery, the understanding is an art that a first timer's not going to have.
Do you have, this is a quick side note as I get into this. Do you think you have the art of the speech mastered? I sat side stage at MSG and I watched different people come up for that rally with different speaking styles. I'm going to give you two examples. There are some that just don't work. I'm not going to point that out. But I'm going to tell you two different speaking styles, both of which worked. Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker Carlson. Two totally different approaches to 20,000 people in a stadium. Vivek, very adept at the rhythm of a big speech. Punchline, audience callback. The audience feels the moment and they call back. And it's interactive. Tucker, very conversational, very almost feels like it's off the cuff, as opposed to rehearsed and perfected. It's really fascinating to watch that. And it just, as I was sitting there thinking, Dana White, very loud, almost as though he had to fill up Madison Square Garden without the microphone. There's a lot of temptations, and the size of the speech really changes how you do it. I do not have that mastered. I have not given enough speeches to think and feel confident. Do you think you do? Like, you know the difference between a ballroom for the Alabama Farmers Association and Madison Square Garden?
I have nothing mastered. I don't think they're at all, but I do think it's familiarity. It's reps, man. You get in front of the Alabama Growers Association, and then you get in front of a Tea Party group, and then you get in front of a pro-life group, and you start to. Here's why Vivek and Tucker work, because Vivek and Tucker are Vivek. They're just who they are in that element, and they're comfortable, and they've also done it a cajillion times. So if Vivek took 2 years off from speaking and then suddenly was on the stage at MSG, he wouldn't be as sharp as he is right now because he's in his groove, he's in his element. And Tucker is just Tucker. But they're not trying to be anything that they aren't. And I've seen people do callbacks who don't get any standing ovation. And then I've seen people who give a speech like Tucker and no one claps really the whole time and they laugh a little bit. And at the end, it's an uproar to your feet. So it's just getting a sense of how the audience engages. And it wouldn't surprise me that both of them nailed it.
All right, I bring that up because I want to talk about the art of stand-up, the art of telling a joke. This is obviously on the heels of Tony Hinchcliffe's joke about Puerto Rico at Madison Square Garden. Comedian Anthony Jeselnik was with Theo Von, and he was talking, I don't know if this is after what happened at Madison Square Garden or not, but he was talking about the idea of people upset at a joke that you make. And while that comedy is art and part of art is getting away with it. Listen to Anthony Jeselnik.
And all these comics now, it's like almost the point is to get in trouble. It's like, why are you giving me shit? I'm a comic. I'm allowed to say whatever I want. That's wrong, as far as I'm concerned. Art.
Oh wait, say it again, so I don't miss it.
People think like, oh, as a comic, your job is to get in trouble, and so, but they don't want to get yelled at. It's like it's okay to make people mad, but they don't want any pushback, and I think that's wrong. As a comedian, you want to make people laugh. This is a quote attributed to Andy Warhol that I love. It's just art is getting away with it. You know, if you put out a special and everyone's pissed, like you didn't get away with it. You know, you need to make everyone laugh. Otherwise, you're just a troll.
Okay. So I think it's really interesting. What are your thoughts?
That's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I think I didn't see everything that preceded the joke that was made about Puerto Rico, but in my sense, I don't know, and maybe you were there at that time. I don't know if you were already there. It was a non sequitur. It was just a punch for punching's sake to a crowd that didn't have any special animus or reason to be thinking about or looking down on Puerto Rico. So it was sort of like, oh, okay, what next? Watch how, Jimmy Failla or, Joe Mackey, when they're warming up the Patriot Awards or something, they know their crowd and they play to the crowd and get away with what they can get away with, understanding that crowd. And I just think that didn't happen. And you're right, though. I see all the stuff on Instagram. There's a lot of like, I'm going to say the craziest shit that I can because you're going to get offended and that's your problem. And fine. That's okay. That's your prerogative. You have the First Amendment. And I sometimes it makes me laugh. But the people that do it with a sleight of hand are the most interesting, for sure.
Yes. That's what I find fascinating. Okay. So, Here are my thoughts about like this idea of getting away with it. I've never met Jeselnik, and I met Hinchcliffe for the first time this weekend at the rally. And super nice guy. Really liked him. I didn't think it was the best joke. I don't care about the offended part. I'm talking about just like the comedic part. I didn't think it was the most funny joke. But, okay, so Tony does like roasts. He does insult comedy, right? And he's great if you go and look at the roast of Tom Brady. He's great. Like he roasts everybody. But it's weird. Like in that environment, it feels like he's getting away with it. And what he's doing is every single person he's insulting is enjoying the moment and they're laughing at it. And the jokes are vicious. From Tom Brady to Gronk to Jeff Ross to Nikki Glaser, they're vicious. But whether or not it's the twinkle in his eye or the speed with which he's delivering the jokes or the fact that he's face to face with them, he's getting away with it. I don't think Jeselnik would endorse the Heckler's veto. See, that's what it sounds like he's saying. If people are mad, then you didn't get away with it. Well, that's not true. I don't think it's what he's saying. I would want to clarify with him if he were here because we're deep into that age. We'd probably even come out the other side of it. That was like, 20 to 2022. That was what everybody was doing. I'm offended. You should be canceled. And it gave this Heckler's veto to everybody. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is you've got to get the subject of your joke to almost laugh along with you. And because of the setting and the way that joke was delivered, nothing asked Puerto Ricans to laugh at themselves or their island. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so therefore it wasn't artistic. It did come off as troll.
Yeah, it was just a junk ball. It was just junk. And we can laugh at that in certain contexts. In other contexts, that joke might have been funny to a certain group if it had been precursor. But it was just out of nowhere. And it's not a Heckler's veto. I think comedians should be able to say exactly what they want. But you also deal with the consequences if there are groups of people that decide, well, you're just not that funny because what you're doing is trying to, rile people up for riling people's up. So I'm not endorsing shutting comedians down at all. It's just the people that do it the best are the ones that make us all laugh, especially when the jokes are on me.
Especially when the joke is on me. That's perfect. And I think that's what he's getting at about when it becomes art. All right, finally, let's talk about Kamala Harris, Pete, on Joe Rogan. The situation is that Kamala Harris wants Joe Rogan to submit to some of these conditions. Joe Rogan has posted about it.
Come to her.
I'll put these up on the screen so everybody can see it. But the Joe Rogan experience is almost always in Austin, and it is almost always 3 hours long. Well, they want Joe Rogan to come to her, and they want to put a time limit roughly at 1 hour. Rogan tweeted, "For the record, the Harris campaign has not passed on doing the podcast. They offered a date for Tuesday, but I would have had to travel to her, and they only wanted to do an hour. I strongly feel that the best way to do it is in the studio in Austin. My sincere wish is to just have a nice conversation and get to know her as a human being. I really hope we can make it happen." Your thoughts, Pete?
There's a reason they call it an experience and not a podcast. It is a roller coaster. It weaves in its own way, in a way that only Rogan sort of rolls with and is unique. Listen, I've done podcasts that, and I know you have too, that could go 3.5 hours. And up front, I say, hey, I only got about 90 minutes if we can do that. And then sometimes it goes 90, sometimes it goes 2 hours and 15 because you're just having a great conversation. So I understand the scheduling thing. But if you're Kamala Harris and you really want to reach young men because that's where you're bleeding, you're never going to get more eyeballs than you are going to get on Joe Rogan, because everyone's going to want to tune in and hear how she does inside that experience with Joe, who, even when he was interviewing Trump, was pretty fair to her, saying, hey, I want her to come. I'm not trying to bash her. I'm not trying to, he wasn't making Puerto Rican jokes about her. He was being pretty straightforward to say, I'd still like her to come on the program. You do the Joe Rogan experience if you want to reach those guys. If you want reasons to say no, you create parameters that Joe Rogan's going to say no to. And that's probably
She doesn't want to do it.
He doesn't. Yeah, she
doesn't want to do it.
It's probably smart for her because she definitely doesn't want to do it.
Right. It's just like, hey, man, you want to meet me at like 10 over at, the steakhouse. Let's have a drink, have a steak, before we go to bed and do the show tomorrow morning. Yeah. Can we make it 11? And I might be 15 minutes late, but right around 11. And you're like, no, I can't because I got to go to bed. And I just keep putting parameters on it without saying no that make it impossible for you to do it. That's what she's doing. See, the Joe Rogan experience is 3 hours, and it is Austin. Trump went and did the Joe Rogan experience, just like every other guest. It's not a traveling show, okay? It's not a 1 hour show. That's not what the Joe Rogan experience is. She wants to use, I'm going to say this, but it's not really what she wants. But she wants to give the appearance that she wants to use Joe Rogan to publish the Kamala Harris experience. Like, you come to me, we do an hour. Like, that's not the Joe Rogan experience. That's not what I do. That's not why I'm the #1 podcaster in the world. That is not what I do. But the truth is, it's not even that she wants Joe to do the Kamala experience. She doesn't want to do it, period. Yeah. So she's going to set some parameters that ensure that it never happens. And it won't. And we'll see if that works. But in the reality is they have a terrible candidate that can't do these things, is not authentic, is the opposite of skillful like Vivek or Tucker Carlson, and has to be curated. And 3 hours with Joe Rogan would be a disaster. What digging into any level, that's why it'd be so great, but it's never going to happen. Any level of detail on any of these things would be, can you imagine him being like, well, so tell me about McDonald's. Like, you worked there, like why, or just anything in a conversational way it's her nightmare. So it will not happen. It was never going to. Two things on this. You may know this guy. I met him once. Stuart Stevens. Didn't he run the campaign for Mitt Romney for president? He's one of these one-time Republicans. Lincoln. He's a Lincoln. Stevens. What was the first name? Stewart. Yes, he did. He, like Mike Murphy,
McCain.
these like campaign managers for maybe McCain, maybe Romney, all these guys. They went Lincoln Project, and then that became indistinguishable from the left. I mean, it really is. I just grabbed this today because I thought it was fascinating and so representative. He tweeted out, demanding a vice president come to you in the final week of a campaign sort of says it all. A reliable side product of steroid abuse is feeling self-importance and omnipotence. So there's two things I want to take away from this tweet from Stuart Stevens. First of all, a reliable side product of steroid. This is supposed to represent the respectable wing of the Republican Party. Like, this ad hominem attack against Joe Rogan for not going to Kamala Harris is supposed to represent the good, respectable, old Mitt Romney, John McCain wing of the Republican Party. I know you went like full lunacy with Lincoln Project, but you're not even a shell of your former self, or you've dropped the facade of your former self. But the other one is this Orwellian twisting of words, demanding a VP come to you. Because the reason I point that out, Pete, is that's kind of taken off. I invite you to come to my house. You say, no, you come to my house. And I'm like, no, the party's at my house. And now I'm demanding that you come here. It's an invitation. Accept or decline. I'm not demanding you do anything. It's like, do you want to come on the biggest podcast in the world? I don't know unless you can come to me. That's not really how we do it. And now you are demanding she bend to the wills of your omnipotence and feelings of self-importance.
That's exactly right. We've all done podcasts. I didn't want to going places I don't want to go to, but you're selling a book or you're talking about something, and it's their house, and you respect it as their house, and you treat it that way. And you're definitely a guest. She is gonna. I look forward to talking to you on Monday on a special edition of the Will Cain Show, because I don't know how much it'll be very interesting to see what the world looks like on Monday, Will, like how everybody's feeling on Monday, because this churn's not going to matter anymore. She's not going to do it. She's not going to do any more tough interviews. She's hiding behind $1 billion in paid media and a characterization of Trump. Both sides have made their closing argument. I guess that's because early voting is over. Can you help me with this? Why does early voting stop? Why do you early vote until like Wednesday and then early voting stops? And then there's like 5 days of no early voting and then you vote on election day? Has anybody ever answered that?
Is that like, I've never asked. Is it like, we go out for warm-ups pregame, then we leave the field and they kind of tidy the field and get it up ready and you come out for the game? Did they need a minute to tidy it up and get their ducks in a row?
Rehearsal?
I don't know.
I don't understand. But I did early vote. Yes.
Voting it is like, just take a minute. We don't have to break it down. Isn't it ridiculous how complicated it is in America? And it's not. Like, we just need a reminder. It's not that complicated in the rest of the world. They pull it off. They get results within like 12 hours of the polls closing, and they move on. They've got an election. And everybody's already lining up the lawyers right now. Both sides lining up the lawyers.
The question is, though, Will, do you want a federal system or do you want a state-based system? And I love the state-based system that we have, which leads to inherent discrepancies and a little bit of chaos, but I'd rather choose locally. Like, I walked into my ballot box in Tennessee, and Tennessee's rated the #1 most secure elections in America. Like, the lady stopped me at the door and said, "Do you have an ID?" And before I could even go in the building. And then she said, "Are you from Sumner County?" Like, because there's multiple. I'm like, yep. She's like, "Okay, you can go through." And then they checked my ID 2 times carefully and printed a thing out, and I signed it, and then I gave it in. Then it was easy. My state does it in a good way. Other states do it terribly. I'd rather have that than DC deciding. And that would maybe make it easier, but I don't like that.
I wanted to ask you this. This is just real quick on this note. Where did this come from? An Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs research poll released on October 28th that 41% of registered voters are extremely or very concerned about post-election political violence. Another 35% say they are somewhat concerned about an outbreak of unrest after Election Day, adding up to 76% of people are somewhat or more concerned about political violence after Election Day.
That tracks with guys and gals. Last night, there was a book launch party for a wonderful woman from our church at a local coffee shop. And I was talking to the guy, and universally, that was their fear. Texts I'm getting from people are the fear of what happens next. Where does it go? Not that none of them want it to go that way. They're just concerned that it could. And that is a reflection of a breakdown in trust of a system, because we can't even just count the votes and trust each other in the process.
Totally agree. All right. He'll be with us next week. He'll also be with me this weekend on Saturday for Fox and Friends Weekend. It's Pete Hegseth. I'll see you again next time. Thanks, man.
Hey, brother.
All right. There he goes. Pete Hegseth. All right. Coming up, the Supreme Court of the United States sides with the state of Virginia on purging the voter rolls of undocumented non-citizens. Big news today. We'll share that with you. Plus, of course, a Yankee fan ripped a baseball out of Mookie Betts' glove. And I personally think it was awesome. Next on The Will Cain Show. The Supreme Court of the United States sides with Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin in purging non-citizens from the voting roll. 3 Supreme Court justices said, no, Everyone should be able to vote, even if you're not American. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe if you want to be here next week when we go live on Election Day, 10 a.m. from a diner in North Carolina. We'll talk to the people. We'll see how it's going as votes begun to be cast in person on Election Day. But if you hit subscribe on YouTube, you'll get the reminder when we pop up that we're up and now you're with us. Same thing on Facebook. Or if you want to listen to us after the fact, just go to Spotify or Apple and hit subscribe, and then you'll always have the Will Cain Show. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin put into place a program 90 days outside of an election that reconciles the DMV records with the voter registration polls. They are as such. If someone went to the DMV to renew a driver's license or get a driver's license and said they were not a citizen or couldn't prove they were a citizen, then they would, on a day-to-day basis, be compared to the voter registration polls and booted off. Now, there's supposed to be, according to federal law, a 90-day quiet period from any systemic changes to voter registration. Virginia and Youngkin say not systemic. It's on an individualized basis. All we've done is change it from monthly reporting to day-to-day reporting on self-identified non-citizens. The DOJ says, nope, you've broken the federal quiet period of 90 days. Virginia says, well, we're trying to ensure we're not breaking the federal non-citizens can't vote law. A district federal judge stopped the Virginia purge of non-citizens from the voter rolls. It went directly to the Supreme Court, where today the Supreme Court sided with Virginia. Non-citizens will not remain, approximately 1,600 of them, on the voting rolls. That's all interesting and that's important. The better, more important question, the deeper thematic question, is why in every state, from Georgia to Virginia, is the DOJ trying to do everything they can to ensure that the voter registration rolls have non-citizens on the rolls? Why are they putting everything in the way of ensuring that we don't have non-citizens on the voting rolls? That's a question that maybe we should all ponder. Over on YouTube, Ann Breitrick says to me, hey, Will, take up knitting. It'll help with withdrawal pangs, talking about the moodiness of giving up nicotine. Knitting? And I love how much you listen to the show and comment, but I ain't knitting. Frank Quarters says, I would pay more taxes in exchange for never hearing another word out of the VP Heckler. Red Sundog says, radical plans are not what you bring up the week before election. He's spitballing and seeing what sticks. That always has been his approach to policy. That's talking about Donald Trump talking about the income tax right now. Here's Load 714 says, I'm wearing a garbage bag next week to vote, talking about Joe Biden calling half of America garbage. And then James Mott on YouTube says, it's one thing for a comedian to tell a stupid joke at a political event. It's quite another for a sitting president of the United States to call over half of America garbage. I 100% agree, James Mott. All right, last night was Game 4 of the World Series. Yankees, Dodgers. Yankees won, going away. What was the final score, fellas? I know that you guys are both big Yankees fans. 11-4? Was that the final? 11-4 Yankees?
Bats came alive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're super excited about this, right? Like, we've already had a pre-show fight.
I'm going to look so smart in a couple days.
Or extremely dumb.
What are you doing messing with a man? What are you doing messing with a man who is withdrawing from nicotine, who already lashed out yesterday, arguing with me about whether or not Game 4 of a 7-game series matters, especially when you're down 3-0. There's not a worse game. There's not like a less consequential game. There's not. 2 days, he's like, yeah, this is huge. This is a huge. I'm like, it's the least. This is the least. Like,
I'm a diehard Yankee fan.
I went to Mavs Celtics. Mavs down 3-0 to the Celtics, right? Mavs win Game 4. It's awesome. And maybe I convinced myself just a little bit, maybe this is the beginning of a comeback, but I knew. Not only did I know we were going to lose, odds are we're going to lose Game 5. And that's, the Dodgers have 4 chances to win 1 game. Last night, how about this? Last night will totally be forgotten, but for one thing. Go ahead, James.
Well, the one thing would be the fan, and he really just reinvigorated the crowd and the team and showed them what a fighting spirit
Or
looks
maybe
like.
Volpe's grand slam did that.
I mean, look, Garrett Cole is going to throw 8 shutout innings tonight, put it back to L.A., and once a series is 3-2.
Knock on wood.
Once a series is 3-2, anything can happen. Well, it's 3-2. It's like, okay, Dodgers advantage, but it could go either way, and it gets
Fascinating
exciting.
analysis.
You know, the 2004.
I'll actually give you. Okay, everyone loves up 2004. I'll give you Garrett Cole. I'll give you that game. I'll give you might get it to 3-2. But this thing's over. This thing is over. I'm just doing that for the clip that you can run when you come back and win 4-3.
Clip it.
This thing is
Freezing
over.
cold takes. One of us.
No, last night's game will only be remembered for this. Watch this on your screen. This is Yankee home run would be over the fence, or it's actually a foul ball over the fence. Mookie Betts goes and retrieves it over the fence. It's an out, right? But 2 Yankees fans, one in particular, grab Mookie Betts' glove as it's over.
Here's the slow-mo.
And pry it open. How does all this happen, by the way, while he's in the air? That fan's a stud.
Watch
we
this,
need to
watch
get
this, watch
here we
this.
go. Here's the close-up. How does he do this?
Oh,
Grab,
no, because he's not in the air anymore.
Pin. He's standing now.
Yeah,
He grabs his
standing.
wrist.
Pry.
That's so messed up.
Okay, the guy in the home jersey, I don't like the wrist grab there on the right. Okay, why is this guy wearing an Evo Shield sliding mitt? You see that?
I know, I like that. Yeah.
What's he doing with
Right.
the sliding mitt?
Let's go to the game. Bring your sliding mitt. I love it. I love these guys. I love these guys.
See,
Isn't this guy, did we get this guy's name? He's been banned for life from Yankee Stadium. He's an Italian guy, probably from Staten Island. You know, I love him. Yeah, I ripped it right out of his glove. You know, I mean, this guy lives in infamy. He's an ultimate fan, and it didn't hurt the game. It didn't hurt the game. He's still out.
I got it.
Betts gets the out. What's up, 2 days?
Austin Capabianco, season ticket holder also.
Yeah.
And his friend John Peter.
Yeah.
Johnny Peters, how we doing?
Capabianco.
Yeah, Capabianco.
How you doing?
Johnny Caps. Johnny Caps.
Yeah, I ripped it out of his glove. Forget about it.
Forget about it. I think it's ridiculous.
I love this guy.
It's like
why?
It's just he's grabbing his wrist. I mean, look,
he caps it.
I don't know. It's just I saw it. The first reaction was, "Holy crap, that's not good." And my cousin Mark was like, "That's actually hilarious." So I didn't think.
What's the guy at Wrigley? They did a 30 for 30 on him.
Steve Bartman.
The kid. Bartman did it to his team. This
Jeffrey
guy's
Mayer.
doing it to the visiting team.
That was different.
That's what makes.
It was in the stands.
That's why.
Yeah.
Let's get Capabianco on. I bet we could book him. I would love to talk. Is it Austin Capabianco?
Johnny.
Austin?
I think it's Johnny Capabianco.
I just had it.
Johnny Caps.
I hope so. It would be such a bummer if it's Austin. Capabianco.
It's Austin. Yeah.
Damn.
That's a bummer.
I know.
It should be Frankie,
Hello,
Johnny,
Giancarlo
like-
Capabianco.
Let's only refer to him by his last name.
Yeah, Austin. What is his dad Italian and his mom's from like? Is it where?
Vermont.
His mom is some liberal lady from Bethesda, right? Yeah. She's not. He's like, I really want his name to be Giancarlo. We're gonna call him John, and she goes, I'm in love with Austin. Okay. It's Austin Capabianco.
Do you think
Let's
she's
get
mad?
Austin on the show.
All right.
Who? Mom?
Yeah. Dad was cool with
I
it.
think
Mom
the
didn't like
entire. I think the entire family is proud of him today. I think when he walked into the kitchen, they're like, "Oh, hey!"
You're never paying for a beer again, there, buddy."
it. Well, there we go.
I love it. Let's book him. Capabianco. We're just going to call him Johnny. Johnny Austin Capabianco. Next time on the Will Cain Show. I also want to do this. I want to start breaking down early vote and mail-in balloting totals, voter registration. I want to see if we can see if this is different than 2020. All that's coming up this week on the Will Cain Show. See you next time.